The following is a video response to comments on a blog I recently published expressing some concerns about the research of anti-neoplastons by the Burzynski Clinic of Houston, Texas. I wrote my blog after reading some extraordinary comments about this research on P.Z. Meyer's Pharyngula blog and biologist Jen McCrite's Blaghag blog. Let's get started. A user by the name of Matt sent the first comment I'd like to mention. He praised my blog and asked some very basic questions about peer review. After answering his questions, I received a reply from Eric Masadi, and it is his comment I'd like to address. Eric replies, quote, "Anyway, where scientists are published doesn't matter as much as you are making it out to be. You are blowing this way out of proportion. Dr. Burzynski's studies have been replicated, which goes way further than peer review. Peer review, also those journals are peer-reviewed, isn't, lest we forget, a main aspect of the scientific method." End quote. Where do I start? First of all, every sentence in this statement is absolute nonsense. If a scientist publishes only in journals that are known for cheating or not verifying their papers, it raises alarm bells that the scientist in question either isn't serious about their research or cannot substantiate his or her claims well enough to convince the scientific community who review papers in a more prestigious journal. I'm not blowing it out of proportion if I'm conceding to the very same objections that relevant experts are also expressing. You are making an exception in this one case. Why do you make an exception? You can say the research has been replicated, but where is the evidence of this? It should be in the journals. Peer review is not itself part of the scientific method. It is a filtering mechanism employed by the scientific community. It is what makes science reliable by minimizing bias and forcing researchers to get their work checked. Eric also states, quote, "Never heard of impact factor before, but I'm learning too. I don't regard IF as priority. What is the PLOS's IF rating? Oh wait, it's not even listed. I guess that means everything published there can be ignored." You never heard of the impact factor, yet you disregard it. Then that's where we have our problem. I never heard of it either until recent weeks, but I had the presence of mind to ask questions and receive an education from published experts before making my judgment, while you simply choose to ignore it. As for the PLOS, I presume you mean the Public Library of Science. Their journals are assessed on a different scale, applying impact factor to the individual articles rather than the whole journal. I'll be honest and admit that if I were assessing a paper in their journals, I would be exchanging correspondence with experts for help. I was curious and researched PLOS medicine for research on anti-neoplastons and was not surprised when it returned zilch. So your attempts to confound my standard of evidence not only failed to do this, but they even fail to support the research to which I'm objecting. Eric also states, quote, "I think what you are saying is pretty much telling me that integrative cancer therapies isn't peer-reviewed, which it is. Impact factor makes no difference whether or not it's peer-reviewed." You think that's what I'm saying? If my objection is unclear, why don't you read my blog again, and this time don't skip parts of it. I state very clearly that ICT is a peer-reviewed journal, but it's an obscure one at best. A journal with a low impact factor is an indication that either few experts read it or few experts cite its papers. In either case, it would go a long way to silence skeptics like me if the research were published in The Lancet or the Journal of Oncology, or any other journal with a reasonable impact factor. The problem is that you look at this phrase and mentally turn it into this. And Eric finally replies, quote, "This is what you said." He's taking a small cut of something that I said to Matt. "Impact factor, or IF, is the way the scientific community determines the credibility and prestige of any journal based on how compelling its content is for the experts who read them, when in fact that is not what IF calculation is." Compelling? How can you even measure that? Anyway, this is what is calculated for IF. A, the number of times articles published in 2006 and 2007 were cited and indexed journals during 2008. B, the total number of citable items published in that journal in 2006 and 2007. Citable items are usually articles, reviews, proceedings, or notes, not editorials or letters to the editor. Not anything to do with peer review as far as I can tell. That's because you're plugging your ears and only reading my comments in part. Why don't you read the rest of my statement where I paraphrased basically what you pasted from Wikipedia? Let's have a look at the rest of my statement. Quote, a given journal can earn a high impact factor by publishing impressive papers that are read by the relevant experts and further their own studies, compelling them to cite the papers in question. When a journal's papers accumulate lots of citations from experts, these are counted and averaged to the journal's impact factor. Journals that experts collectively ignore naturally have a low IF. That's how you measure how compelling something is. If experts cite the papers and use them, they are compelling. And for Eric's last statement, quote, you have gotten your information on how to interpret IF mainly from blogs, which begs the due question of its unbiased validity. Now, I cited blogs here because they're accessible to everybody. Did you notice the blogs I cited were by scientists and university professors? In addition, I have regular correspondence with published scientists when I have questions about this sort of thing. I also have regular emails with a science journalist. I find it especially disheartening that some members of the Zeitgeist movement, which promotes the application of the scientific method for social concern, actually try to persuade some of us to reject or ignore the sciences when they conflict with our personal opinions. I'll say it again once more in case you all missed it.